I have been to many games at Bryant-Denny Stadium. I don't know, in the dozens, but I've been to many games there. 2019 LSU, Joe Burrow versus Tua, I was there, and I think that's about as red hot as I've ever heard that stadium. A close second is last night. I have written on this post-it. Number one, 2019 LSU. Number two, 2022 Texas A&M. We said going in, I said all week to you, I said on the pregame coverage on CBS, I reiterated it last night after the game. A lot of people nationally did not expect that to be that kind of charged environment, but if you're closer to the scene, you understand they didn't care what the point spread was last night. They wanted blood. They didn't get it. They didn't get it. They wanted to have that moment where you screenshot that scoreboard, and it just never came. We got a four-quarter game last night, didn't we? Now, there's this thing that happens with some elite teams. I would say it happens with Bama mostly. It's that feeling of being stunned when you just get a legitimate football game. Because normally the point spreads are really big because Vegas can't afford not to put out big point spreads on these games featuring these teams, especially when they're at home. But the point spread does not impact the actual game that's played. Sometimes Bama blows folks out. They did it to Arkansas last week. Sometimes they don't. And there's this fine line, for instance, in a game like this where Bama's up 24-14 with the ball in plus territory in the second half. That is on the precipice of becoming a multi-score blowout. But if you continue to turn the ball over, and A&M, let me rephrase, forces turnovers, which they did multiple times last night, you can get what you got last night. But sometimes people are stunned when a legitimate football game breaks out. And I don't know necessarily, I do know why. I don't know why you continue to allow yourself to be stunned. I've heard a lot of folks talk about this today because I've talked to a lot of folks about the game today in my few waking hours. The gym over here in Nashville was abuzz with different takes on this game. And it seemed to me as I silently listened that everyone's looking for this grandiose, deeper meaning to what you saw last night. I got none of that. I got nothing like that. I hope you're not looking for really, really overtly deep thought here. Let me tell you what I think happened. What I think happened is Alabama played a backup quarterback and finished -3 in the turnover battle and missed a couple of field goals. And because of that, they played a game that history would say they probably should lose. They ended up winning it, but that's what we saw. That's not me saying A&M didn't have a lot to do with that. They certainly did. I almost don't believe, I believe there are two different categories of turnovers. One is the unforced type and one is the forced type. A&M forced all the turnovers that they got yesterday, but the fact remains, Bama finished in -3 turnovers, and 17 of those 20 A&M points coming off of those turnovers led to the result you got. So that's not stunning at all. But there's also nothing deeper to take away from that. I believe if Bryce Young played in this game last night, it would have been a runaway victory. He didn't, so it wasn't. So let's dive into what it means, because I personally just don't think I'm taking nearly as much away from it as some other folks. I saw this, for instance, on the Alabama side, totally different. I think the AP dropped him to 3. At least that was the rumor in the control room because Colin looks at the AP for me, so I don't have to look at it myself. And that's all well and good. I don't care about that. We'll do the JP poll Tuesday night. But I saw a lot of people drawing conclusions about how vulnerable Alabama is and this and that and blah, 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 and what they can or can't do against Tennessee if Jalen Milroe is starting at quarterback. Now that we have time to talk about, and that I think is a more than valid concern that you fine folks should have. But here's the reality to me. Here's how I viewed it through an Alabama lens. You temporarily lost something in Bryce Young. You're going to get him back, maybe this week, we'll see, but you temporarily lost a very valuable piece of your team. And you inserted Jalen Milroe. He played as good as he could. He's probably a shell of what he eventually would be if you just played him 2 full seasons. It's not like I punted on Jalen Milroe last night after one game. But he had struggles. He did some good things, but also had struggles. But you lost one key component of your team, and that's all anyone's focused on. And I watched him from field level last night, and I watched what 31 did all night, and I watched what 15 did all night, and I watched what 41 did all night. And now Bama's got that package where they just put all 3 of those pass rushers, 3 of about the 5 best in the country, all playing on one team, and they just put them on the field at the same time with one down lineman, give it a cool name, I think the Cheetah package, and it's terrifying. And you watch it from field level, and I went back and watched the replay. It's even more frightening from field level than it is on the replay because you see the quickness from field level that I just don't think translates when you're watching either all 22 footage or when you're watching the broadcast feed. They had 3 sacks. They had 6 tackles for loss. Here's the kicker. They had 19 quarterback hurries. That translates to about 1 out of every 3 times Haynes King tried to throw the ball last night. He was under duress, and therefore it's a miracle A&M wasn't the team dealing with a ton of turnovers. But also, you got the pass rush that you need to be a championship caliber team. You've got the running game you need. And you've got a superstar in your backfield in Jahmyr Gibbs. He had 21 carries, 154 yards. That's 7.3 per carry. He can also be very active for you, as we've seen in the passing game. So what I'm trying to tell you, my takeaway was about Bama is Alabama's not the team we will eventually know them to be. Once you have Bryce Young back, assuming you get him back fully healthy, okay? Once you get Bryce Young back, you get to pair him and what you get as an offense, because you have him, with that pass rush. And you get to pair him in the backfield with that running game. And I've told you once, and I'll tell you again, I think the more finished product of this team is going to be the best team in the country. Whether you think they are right now is irrelevant, because we decide that in December and January, in whether it be a conference championship or a playoff. But I don't know. I didn't walk away at all last night saying, boy, Bama's in trouble. No, they're in trouble if they got to play their backup quarterback. That's exactly how they're in trouble. And we'll see how that plays out this week, because they're going on the road to Tennessee. And we got, again, a lot of time to talk about that. I got several thoughts on Texas A&M here. Again, this is not going to be very deep, because I don't think that you need to go there. Immunity. If you could just forget everything else, we don't need to look at box score, turnovers, final score, anything like that. From a pure effort standpoint, if you could just promise me that that Texas A&M team would give me that every week, I'd be satisfied. Because even an imperfect Texas A&M team, even an imperfect offense that's going to struggle to put points on the board consistently, if I just get that effort, by sheer force of how talented their roster is, offensively and defensively, they'll win games for me. If I got the effort I got last night against App State, that would not be a loss. It would be a win. Ditto in the Mississippi State game, or at the very least, it would have been more competitive. Now, I know why we saw that effort, because as we talked about last week going into it, we were going to get a 1-game season from them. We were going to get a Super Bowl. We weren't going to get the kind of A&M team you've seen so far this year. So for better or for worse, we were going to get a unique version of them. Well, here's the thing about a unique version of yourself. If you can do it once, that means you were always capable of it, and it means moving forward, unless you're just devastated by injury and you lose key pieces, you will be capable of it. So right now, Texas A&M's got, 3 losses. They've still got a long way to go. I think what struck me last night was the tone and the tune coming out of it was, well, I guess Jimbo's not on the hot seat anymore. Well, I thought it was stupid to ever say he was on the hot seat. Not making people who say it's stupid. I'm saying I thought it was a stupid thing to say. Smart people say dumb things all the time. So I thought that was always dumb. But a lot of folks came out of last night saying, oh, no more hot seat for Jimbo. This is sort of like Dennis. I was doing postgame with Dennis last night. Dennis said, I think this is a moral victory for them. That's great. That's great. But that's the kind of stuff you say more at the end of the season. They still got half a dozen games to play. There's still a long way to go. They pulled this upset last year, and then they lost 2 more games after that. But yet they still rode that wave, that upset wave, and the fact that they were hurt at quarterback last year, which gave them an excuse and a trapdoor to a number 1 recruiting class and to a ton of momentum coming into this year. So far it hasn't gone as planned. They can get some run out of this effort they had last night. They can still have a decent year. It will fall below their standard, but they can have a decent year. But look, you know what it's going to take? It's going to take some consistency in performance. It's going to take them, in some cases, doing what they did last night, being more aggressive in leveraging their best playmakers. Did you see how often they threw it to Evan Stewart last night? I mean, I had some Bama folks telling me, boy, Terrion Arnold had a bad game. No, he didn't have a bad game. He got targeted all night. Having a bad game would be Evan Stewart with about 3 or 4 touchdowns on his stat sheet. Evan Stewart had a big night because Evan Stewart's one of the best players in the country, even as a true freshman. And he went heads up with Terrion Arnold a whole lot. Now, Terrion Arnold won his fair share of those battles too, but that's the point. Like Nick Saban puts a ton of true freshmen on the field. Well, Jimbo's got a true freshman on the field there. And they finally threw it his way. I think they targeted him 18 times last night. That's what you got to do, especially since Aniyah Smith is gone for the season for them. That is kind of antithetical to how they've handled play calling so far this year. Now, a simple-minded person could look back at me and say, oh, Jimbo only did that because he knew that was what he had to do to win. Well, what a revelation that is, huh? Now, I would suggest that that doesn't apply just to last night. I would suggest that moving forward, when you play Ole Miss, for example, I would suggest A&M needs to do that against them to win. And then just rinse and repeat all the way down the line. So I know that everyone wants big grand takeaways. I chose to react to what we actually saw last night. I was thankful that I was in the stadium and didn't have to watch the broadcast. I have nothing against the CBS broadcast. Actually, I think it's the best product in the country. But I was not really interested in hearing the Jimbo Nick Saban stuff. What I was interested in seeing is how a couple of backup quarterbacks perform. Now, Haynes King is a starting caliber quarterback, but I was interested in the football game. My takeaways, Bama won't win what they want to win with a backup quarterback, so it's essential they get Bryce Young back. I think A&M could be 5-1 right now if I did nothing more than get a copy-paste of the effort they gave last night. Those were my two big takeaways, and those aren't very big. A&M goes into a bye week. We got to see how they parlay this. Do they use it as a springboard? They can still have a really good second half of the season. Bama at Tennessee this Saturday. I've talked about that game for a long time on this show. And as you saw Thursday night, we have a very sizable young audience. We have our 18 to 24-year-old demo is the biggest one we have. That makes no sense to a 19 or 20-year-old. When you talk Bama, Tennessee, you might as well be talking like Rutgers, Ohio State or something. Not quite to that degree, but no one has any concept of why you're talking about that game with reverence. Why would you give that any special consideration? They just think it's a conference game. Well, it is now. It wasn't already. The third Saturday in October used to be the premier rivalry in the SEC. And this includes a generation long before I could operate an automobile or really was coherent enough to know what I was watching. But there was a time, and you can ask your older Bama friends, brethren, relatives, uncles, whatnot, that was the rivalry. Wasn't the Iron Bowl. Iron Bowl's always mattered a lot down there, but the older the Alabama fan you're talking to, the more likely they are to say, yeah, Tennessee's actually the one I grew up learning to hate. And Auburn, I felt the same way about, but it was just a little bit different with Tennessee because Bryant made it that way. And a generation now has gone by. Well, time has passed a generation by without knowing what that third Saturday in October rivalry is about. And the reason I'm looking forward to this Saturday is because finally a generation gets to find out what that third Saturday in October rivalry is about. That is going to be an amazing, amazing atmosphere in Neyland Stadium Saturday night. Guys, thanks for watching Late Kick. Make sure to leave a comment. I love interacting with you. But most of all, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep all of this free.